Please welcome the CEO of Siemens UK, Juergen Maier.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you, David, for that really very kind introduction. Very much appreciated. And well, good morning to all of you. And really, what a great pleasure and what a great joy it is to speak to you, our future, our next generation of leaders from around the world. And indeed, my talk is definitely about you. It's about your leadership for what I hope will be a different type of capitalism, a very responsible capitalism. But before I talk more about you, I thought it might be worth just reflecting a little bit on my story. Because I belong to a group of leaders who were inspired by the 1980s. The movement of the new 1980s capitalism, where there was an opportunity for people like me from very ordinary working class backgrounds. I went to a comprehensive school in Leeds in the north of England to go out there, make a difference, and do damn well. And what was also exciting is that we were tasked with fixing some of the problems that we had seen emerge out of a much more difficult 1970s. We had managed quite badly the transition from the end of the second industrial revolution into the third industrial revolution. So we set about a task as a group of leaders in politics, in business, in NGOs. And actually, if you reflect back, it's not all bad. We have achieved a lot. The global economy overall, if you take that 3 decades especially, of the 80s, 90s, the first part of the 2000s, they did damn well. The global economy was generally growing, living standards were rising. We all know the statistics that actually we've done a damn good job as a global economy of helping take many, many people out of poverty, 1 billion people out of poverty across the globe. So a lot of progress was made. But of course today we are here with a bit of a different view, and that is that in the last decade things started to go horribly wrong. And it was indeed the crash of 2008 that spurred on the first real signals of that capitalism not going quite right. And indeed, especially in the developed world, here in the UK, around Europe, in America, living standards were beginning to stagnate, and overall the mood is not the best. And quite frankly, I think this generation of leaders, to which I belong, we're struggling. We're struggling on how do we fix these issues. And it is a little bit of a rerun of history. It's a little bit like in the 1970s, my previous generation needed some help on how do we more responsibly move from the second to the third industrial revolution. How do we now transition from the third to the fourth industrial revolution? And we need your help. Now let's just quickly reflect on what are some of the factors that are not going so well. And I break it down broadly into 3 areas. And the first one is that I'll come back to is that unfortunately too often we forgot to put the word responsible in front of capitalism. There was not enough focus on social purpose. You've been talking a huge amount about that, on inclusion, inclusivity of everybody and of those very responsible behaviors. Being quite honest with you, if I reflect back into my education at university, my management training, I don't remember ever learning about the responsibility that comes with this capitalism. I was taught about the opportunities, and people forgot to tell me about the responsible bit. And I'm so pleased that you are going to be the generation of leaders that automatically embrace and understand the need for responsibility within capitalism. And the second key reason is there is a bunch of people out there who sees opportunities like this to blame and then to come up with simple populist, nationalist arguments, which, of course, are not really the answer. Blaming the EU, blaming unfair trade, and using old methods to try and fix them. We'll throw some more tariffs on that trade, and that's the way in which we will fix these problems, where, of course, the answer is to create a more open trade, a fairer trade, a responsible trade, and more globalization. And the third reason why things have gone wrong is that our leadership styles that we have developed through this last 30 or 40 years are not working, and they're not changing fast enough. So we need help. And this is your opportunity. But how? So let's take the first thing, which is I genuinely believe you are the generation of leaders that are going to put responsibility firmly in front of capitalism. How do we make the fourth industrial revolution to be one which is totally inclusive? The technologies of artificial intelligence, of all of the data that needs to flow in our factories, within our industries, and of course between consumers. How do we do that ethically? How do we do that responsibly, unbiased? We will work with you, the next generation, to help us sort that out. How will we make sure that our organizations are truly sustainable, net carbon zero, and embracing the circular economy like you heard from our previous speaker? At Siemens, we are clear. We've made our commitment. We will be net carbon zero by 2030, and we are creating technologies at an incredible pace to help decarbonize the planet. We are the leaders in offshore wind here in the UK, incredibly proud of the amount of offshore wind we are providing, and we are absolutely leading the green hydrogen revolution, which, if you're interested, there is a talk from Siemens later on this evening on. And I'm pleased that we've got 50 people here from our global Siemens team. I'm expecting a cheer here, of course. Who are the leaders who are going to work with us to make sure we absolutely deliver on those promises. The second and very important thing is that you will bring the new styles of leadership that are required, where inclusion is key and responsibility is key. And I just give you one bit of advice, and that is don't model yourself too much on what you see as some of today's leadership styles that perceive to be getting the results. Let me just give you an example of my story. When I started life, my role models were largely white men. As a matter of fact, they were all white men. Those were the people that were being successful in society. They were people who often displayed quite bullying type behaviors, and there was definitely a blind eye turned to sexism and other inappropriate behaviors. What today we would call an alpha male. That was quite normal in the 1980s. And I made this mistake of my first decade of my leadership to say, well, that's clearly what I need to be like to get on in this world. And I modeled myself to be an alpha male. I left the real Juergen Maier at the door when I went into work, and I became this person that I thought people wanted me to be successful. And it took me 10 years to realize that it was my difference that can actually bring more change. The fact that I'm a gay man, that I can be open about well, I wasn't quite expecting that. The fact that I can be open about my weaknesses, the fact that I have had serious issues with my own mental health. I've dealt with it. It's made me a stronger leader. It's those differences that have helped me become, I believe, a better leader. So my advice to you is think about your difference. What is your difference? Don't leave that at the door when you get into work. Use your difference and, of course, celebrate it and embrace everybody's difference, because that is what drives innovation, what creates better workplaces and creates better outcomes. And my final point about populism and nationalism, this is, of course, harder because I suspect many of you will go into the world of business and not politics, although I do hope some of you will go into politics too. But wherever you are, you can have an influence. And I do believe that you will be the generation that calls populism and nationalism out and encourages others to do the same. That this is not the right way to succeed. There is a different way, and that is more responsible capitalism, globalization, the right behaviors, the right role models, of which you will become the right role models. And I know that this new world can be delivered. I believe we're just looking at a little bit of a bad decade, like when I was looking at a bad decade of the 1970s, and we sorted the next 3 decades out. It is now an opportunity to go forward with a new, responsible, inclusive capitalism. It can be done, it has to be done, and you are the generation to help us deliver it. Thank you very much.